Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for calling me in this Opposition Day debate, which, judging by the benches opposite, they didn't know about at all. There's been lots of discussion, Madam Deputy Speaker, about large corporate entities, about taxation. So I'll talk a little bit about taxation from a personal point of view, because it's often the case that lots of smaller transactions from a large number of individuals can also make a significant difference. In my previous life as a financial planner, I very much did things along the lines of capital belonging in the hands of the people, to give them the power to shape and determine their own futures. And it's very much the case that our taxation system is something of a Frankenstein's monster. The Honourable Lady from Glasgow Central was quite right earlier on. She said we tinker around the edges, and we do tinker around the edges. In many ways, I agree. The wholesale scrapping and rewriting of the entire system would be absolutely preferable, but a massive undertaking that no government's ever going to do. So, unfortunately, we will always be restricted to tinkering around the edges. And because of that tinkering, it inevitably leads to that wonderful law of unintended consequences and loopholes and things that appear. But despite all of that, you know, as a financial planner, I always used to say to people that paying tax is a privilege. And in many, many countries around the world, there are people who would be delighted to be able to have their own businesses and to thrive and to grow and to pay tax as we do. So it's a privilege, but everyone should pay their fair share. And that word fair is thrown around very, very easily these days. And, you know, it's a very esoteric concept. It's a little bit in the mind of the beholder, if you like. There has to be a point, right? There's a sweet spot whereby there is no incentive to avoid taxation. And we saw it perfectly when we reduced that highest rate of tax from 50 down to 45%. The amount of revenue that generated actually increased. There has to be a point where the incentive is gone. And fairness isn't a concept that's only available to the opposition benches. What about the concept of fairness to the individual who went to university, stayed on for a master's degree, started off at the bottom of an organisation, works 80 to 100 hours a week, sacrificing time with their families and lots of other social benefits that go, so as to carve out a successful career, climbing that ladder and getting to high levels of income where the taxation system is punitive and a punishment on success. So it's not hard to see why those highest earners take steps to mitigate their tax levels. As a financial planner, I would always ensure that all of their legitimate tax breaks were used. The simple things, the ISA allowance, the pensions allowances, allowances on capital gains tax. And then for people who have particularly higher approaches to risk, vehicles like enterprise investment schemes and venture capital trusts. And that word allowance crops up all over the place in our tax code. They're all legitimate ways to mitigate tax. We encourage it. Governments of all colours and descriptions for decades have encouraged tax mitigation legitimately, and it's important that we realise that legitimate tax avoidance happens every day through pensions and ISA investment with the vast majority of public. So we need to change the language we use a little bit around this to make sure that avoidance and evasion are treated and understood very, very differently. But let's be very clear. Every £1 of evaded tax is £1 less for our vital public services. Everybody across this House, and more importantly in the country, recognises it clearly. But this government is tackling the issues, and for opposition parties to decry those efforts is just disingenuous. During the opening remarks from the Shadow Chancellor, there are members opposite yelling 10 years, 10 years, when we talked about our measures to fix the economy. Well, damn right it took 10 years. How long is it supposed to take? What would be reasonable from where we were in 2010?
Exactly. Well said.
The tax gap was 7.3% previously, now it's 5.6%. There was an annual deficit of £153 billion. Now an absolute shadow of that. Party opposite complaining about 10 years, like people who go around setting fires and then complaining that the fire service don't put them out quickly enough. It's nonsense. Especially when in the past 2 years, that Labour Party have voted against various measures that would have helped tackle tax avoidance, evasion and non-compliance. And if you'll pardon the pun, Madam Deputy Speaker, the hypocrisy is a bit rich.
Peter Grant.